Hello. We are live. I think we're live. Yeah, we are live for
Yeah.
sure. Okay. Amazing. Welcome, everybody. We're here for another book club stream. We're going to be focusing on book 2 this time. I think it's called Journey into Otherspace. Book 2 is comprised of, I think, like 10 chapters. It's like chapters 9 to 19. And it's roughly 70-ish pages. So like that's what we're going to be doing with these streams, like, 60 to 70 pages a pop. We have some new guests with us today. We have Al and Ken.
Hello.
Al, the one and only. Why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Al. I guess the one and only. This is a name I came up with for Instagram in the 9th grade, and it somehow morphed to be my name on everything. So I've been a Star Wars fan all my life, and I thought until about a few days ago, I thought I knew something about the expanded universe. I did not. To use an analogy I've been thinking of all day, at one point I was just a farm boy, was discovered by a wise mentor. In this case, Star Wars Reading Club. I found another wiser mentor in Matt Wilkins, and then I decided to face my Darth Vader in Supernatural Encounters.
Yeah.
And got a little bit crushed, but we're rolling with it.
That's okay. At the end of it, you will be the master, not the learner. Ken, people will know Ken from my very first stream when we ranked Sith Lords together, but why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Well, you guys know me, and I changed my name recently again, but I'm just Ken Palpatine in the Discord. Instagram, Kenneth Palpatine, but I'm a big EU guy myself. Been reading it since high school, middle school, and I thought I knew everything about the EU up until Supernatural Encounters, and now my mind has been blown.
So, but before we delve into book 2, why don't you guys tell us a bit about how you found out about Supernatural Encounters? I suspect probably the same way that I did, but I'm curious to hear your story.
For me, it was Maxine.
Me
just
too.
entirely her.
Yeah.
She posted a thing about it. I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And it was completely sold out.
I think for me it was Noah. Noah's server was mentioned a lot there.
Yeah.
But Max really kind of was talking about it in a positive light, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. Might get this.
Yeah, before I got more involved in the fandom, I used to follow Maxine's Instagram page, Strictly Star Wars, and I remember she did a like an Instagram stream once, which is kind of like a live stream, but it's for Instagram. And she was talking about Supernatural Encounters, and I was like, I've never heard of this before, or at least I had vaguely in the past, but I decided to like look it up, and that's how I learned about the book. So yeah, welcome Brennan, and we have some people in the comments as well. Hello, Darth Sidious, good to see you as always, our resident Sith expert. And we have Slav. A wild revanchist appears. All right, why don't we delve into it? Book 2, overall impressions. We'll start with Max and maybe go around to Al and then Brennan, Alex, and Ken.
Yeah, so I feel like book 2 really like just starts to get into it, like it just takes that deep dive right in to the weird and occult, and just does not look back. And really, it's like, at the beginning, you kind of get the more grounded stuff where you're like, they're debating the validity of this tale, and then now you're finally seeing the beginning of that tale that they're recounting, and you get to kind of in this chapter, like you get to experience it along with Arhul and Q9, where it kind of changes like later on in like book 3, but in this one you get to like see it through Arhul's perspective, which is great. And then we get into Otherspace, and Otherspace is just such a realm of weird and like all these strange possibilities and dark entities, and all this unknown lore about Star Wars, because like you'll see the Star Wars universe at surface level. You got the main galaxy and all the planets, and then you just realize that there's this darker mirror to it, and Otherspace is just this like really twisted version in a way of the real galaxy. So, and we get into that, and it's so mind-boggling, and it's really just the tip of the iceberg, because you get into it and you're just like, wow, this is crazy, and then you get into book 3 and you're like, oh my god, this is even crazier than the first 2 books. So that's my take.
How about you, Al? You had to do some catch up because you were in the comments in my last stream, and then I said, "Hey, man, if you want to join," and then you read a whole bunch of it and caught up, and
just burned right through it.
Nice.
Like I said in the opening, I thought I knew things about the EU. I really didn't. Like, after I finished Cult Encounters, I was like, "You're clueless. You have no idea what's going on."
Yeah.
So instead of trying to mine for the lore, I decided to mine for the meta text. So I was looking to all the metatextual, like, real world things in the novel, like the diverting timelines that they mention way later in book 2, as well as the arguments in book 1 that you guys talked about in the last book club. So for me, I was really focused on the metatextual comment that Joe is making, rather than just the lore stuff, because the lore stuff, to be honest, was melting my brain a little bit. So I was like, I need to ground
it in the real world. I get that. Brennan, nice shirt. How about you, man?
Thank you.
What did you think of book 2?
Can you hear me all right?
Oh, perfectly. Yeah.
Okay. I've just got a new mic, so testing it out right now on the fly. So we'll see how that goes. Book 2 was really good. I thought it was great. Like Max said, you're delving further into everything. It's just like in the first book, Joe was like giving us a breather, like gently letting us dip our toes in the water. And then book 2 was like he slammed his foot on the gas.
Yeah.
Just goes full forward. And like
So
Max said,
cool.
we don't look back.
Yeah.
And it just gets crazier from there. And I thought it was a great transitionary book. And I really liked everything about it. Like, again, there's some comedic stuff in this book that had me laughing out loud. Some of the conversations that Arhul has with his droid, stuff like that, like, it had me laughing out loud, just had me rolling on the floor laughing, as they say. Just such quick dialogue. I thought it's really shows Joe's range as a writer. He's able to write all these complex ideas with this lore. He's able to write horror really well. He's able to write debate really well, but he's able to write comedic stuff as well. And I just think he really showed his range, I think, in this book.
You mentioned, before we go on to Ken, you mentioned comedic elements to this book. I think maybe one of the greatest things I've ever read in a Star Wars book ever comes from this book, when Q9 says, "Get your Chewbies out of here."
I
which
love
is,
that.
the greatest thing I've read in a long, long time. Welcome back. Ken, why don't you tell us what you think of book 2, and then we'll go to Alex.
Well, for starters, the Eldritch lore in this book is... Oh man, I was having so many Bloodborne comparisons. I can already see the Marcel, Lawrence, the first Vicar.
Yeah.
Man who played with fire, quite literally. I can see a lot of comparisons with him and Arhul. They search for this forbidden knowledge. They want it, and then it comes back to bite them in the end, in the first book, as we see in the prologue. That's a very, very interesting comparison.
Yeah, for sure. And the Bloodborne parallels are very apparent, I would say, because Bloodborne is also based it's like a love letter to H.P. Lovecraft, in the same way that I think Supernatural Encounters is, and you really feel that in book 2. How about you, Alex? What did you think about book 2 overall? All right, we'll come back to Alex. Feel free to interrupt me anytime. Alex. Yeah, no worries. So the Lovecraft influence I wanted to talk about just a bit, because again, I think it's page 73, he refers to the stars as sinister stars, and that idea is like right out of Lovecraft, right? Sinister stars, like the stars themselves are like, scary, and there's something in Otherspace that's, scary. And I thought that was really cool. It's like reading, Lovecraft, these same kind of like terms that you would read in an H.P. Lovecraft book, like I said last time, the gibbous moon and the sinister stars and that kind of thing. To see that again is really rewarding for someone who spent his youth reading Lovecraft. In this book, we start to get a lot of references to other material that was, suggested reading for Supernatural Encounters. I don't know if anyone else here did, but I actually went and read the Book of the Green Planet last year. Yeah, which is the sequel, the novel sequel to E.T., the Extraterrestrial. I don't even think I've ever seen E.T., the Extraterrestrial.
What?
But I read the novel sequel because I already know kind of vaguely what happens. Yeah, and it was really weird, but really entertaining.
The only reason I caught that was because of a Matt Wilkins video where he talks about the Brodo Asagi, and he mentions that there's a novel from their perspective or whatever.
Yeah,
and I was like, that's that.
Yeah. So I actually have something to add on that. So the way I pictured it, when they were talking about Brodo Asogi and the Asogians, and then I hadn't read the sequel book to E.T., but I've seen the movie hundreds of times. I love it. But I've been on the ride in Universal Studios. The E.T. ride goes into the E.T. homeworld, and you see all the little baby E.T.s and whatnot. So when I was reading that, I was just thinking of the Universal ride and then the cute little music that's playing. So I knew what they were talking about. I was like, oh, it's the E.T. ride, it's their homeworld. So that's just, but the E.T. stuff was absolutely spectacular because it takes just such a little tiny background detail from Phantom Menace and then just turns it into this big thing in Star Wars and connecting it to this other thing, this other franchise. And it kind of also because George and Steven Spielberg were great friends, and then Spielberg doing E.T. and George doing Star Wars, and so it's really cool to see that kind of relationship still kind of there between the Spielberg universe and the Star Wars universe. It's so cool.
And James Luceno was one of the first people who pioneered that. The planet in the Book of the Green Planet is referenced in Cloak of Deception, I believe. And so Luceno was like, all right, George put E.T. and Phantom in the background with Senator Grayblips, or however you pronounce that name. And
Grayblips,
I think it's Spielberg backwards.
Yeah, it's Spielberg backwards. Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's so funny.
And Spielberg put Yoda in E.T. As a Halloween costume.
I love that.
There's that little Easter egg back and forth. And Luceno was like, all right, I'm doubling down. I assume he just finds an old, obscure sequel tie-in novel, reads that, and is like, all right, I'm putting that in Cloak of Deception. And then Joe Bongiorno's merged it further. But I love that there's doubt too. They make us question, did an extraterrestrial really go visit a boy on all human world that's militaristic, or was this just some insane guy who was maybe doing some spice and telling some stories at the bar on Brodo Asagi? I love how gray it is. There's these I think it describes black holes around the planet. Maybe they're using that. Maybe it's time travel. Maybe they're going to another universe. Or maybe this guy's just on acid. And I think that's so cool.
I think that balance is really important too. To keep the book grounded. Because otherwise you're like, is this going to Earth now? Do we really? But if there's a question, you're like,
maybe. Yeah. And then they give E.T. a name too. It's Zrek. And
Zrek.
I love that. And they even just mention Elliot by name and everything.
Elliot name drop,
Yeah, and then it just it gives when you watch the movie and you see E.T., see the kid dressed up as Yoda and he says home, that just it gives more you'll never look at it the same. When you go watch the movie and you see that scene, you're like, wow, it's possible he could actually be from there, and it's possible that he's an absolute lunatic. Who knows?
Right. And that's the thing, about the expanded universe in general. I wanted to say that it really changes the way that I interact with the core media, those being the films, right? When I watch something like, especially the prequels, this is the case for. But when I watch Revenge of the Sith now, it's so much more laden with meaning because of all the stuff that kind of happens in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith that was captured by the multimedia project, and even TCW to a lesser extent. I think it really just kind of changes the meaning of the movie for me, and it makes me appreciate it more.
Yeah. If I could add on to that, that's how it is, like, for me, like, with Phantom Menace. Like, after reading Darth Plagueis for the first time, like, you never look at that movie again.
Never.
Like, you know, like, the conversation with Palpatine and Maul on, like, at night on Coruscant, and you just like, hey, Plagueis is, like, watching them right now, you know? Or, like, it's just so cool. And, you know, now having read it, like, 4 times, it's just, like, it never gets old. And then, like, you just watch Phantom Menace right after, and you're just like, ooh, like, you know.
Could I tack on to that with the way it made me like never look at it the same is I was like 7, 8 years old watching the Phantom Menace, and I was still like, why is their queen like almost my age? Why is the queen of a planet almost my age? Plagueis explains that, and it was so beautiful. Like Plagueis is like using this to his advantage, scheming this like, oh, this person will be weak, and then she ends up being strong because her character is strong. And it just, I love that. And it made me look at Phantom in a different way. Plagueis took away some of the not flaws per se, but the stuff that wasn't the best about Phantom and just made it make sense and made it work.
Yeah.
Plagueis made The Phantom Menace like the best movie ever made. If you take into account Plagueis, it's like the best movie ever made.
That's right.
For
so
me,
now I have
to.
I was going to say, just to finish off that thought that you were. I have to wonder like how I'm going to view things after I read Supernatural Encounters. Like how is it going to change my perspective on the expanded universe? And
certainly already has for me.
Yep.
Me as well. Movies.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, for sure. What were you going to say, Al?
Oh no, very specific example of that for me is does anyone know those Clone Wars Digest comics from the 03 series?
Yeah.
I think it's the first or second one. There's a story that takes place. Ben is telling Luke at the at his home this story. The last time he tells this story, I forget the details, but at the end it's revealed that Ben's last thought before he dies is of the same memory as Darth Vader the moment he kills him. They're both thinking about the same thing, and every time I watch that scene of Vader and Obi-Wan fighting, and I realize at the same moment they're thinking about the same happy memory washed away. That always hits me a little hard.
That's wild. Yeah, that would be very hard to, it's laden with meaning. That would be very hard to get through, to read, and then have to watch that movie again and realize that they're both. It's just like the kind of the tragedy of it, right? They're both thinking about the same thing. Yeah, there's still just a bit of goodness. But we knew that, right? That's how Luke was able to turn him back. There was one, I don't know if you caught it, Max, Kligson's Moon. There was a reference to Kligson's Moon, which is from the old Marvel comics, the 77 Marvel comics, but also now it's being used in Dark Droids, I think, in the Disney canon.
I haven't been reading that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Kligson is like I think he's like a mad, sort of like half man, half droid kind of thing, like android, or cyborg. Sorry, cyborg, I think is.
They made a picture book about it called Droid World, right?
Droid World, that's right. Yeah, and they're reusing that now, that concept in the Disney Marvel comics.
I kind of
dropped off. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really into the just. No,
that's fair. I don't think anyone. I don't know, Al, how much you read of the new stuff, but I don't think anyone else here would be aware of that reference. But I found it interesting, just that Kligson's Moon was referenced.
They've been bringing back. I do know. I don't read the comics, but I do know they've brought back a lot of the old Marvel stuff, like the family. Oh, what are their names? Oh my god,
the
tags.
Yes.
Yes. Nope, I'm saying it wrong.
Yeah, I think it's the tags. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like Domina tag or
yeah.
That
is correct.
Did anyone catch this reference to Bedlam stormtrooper helmets from 8,000?
Yes.
I did.
Yes.
When they're talking about
sweet.
when they're talking about like the potentiality of time travel. Does anyone know what that's referring to? I didn't look it up, but
did
you look it up?
Oh, so I just reread Telotny Throws a Shape last night to like get into like refresh my memories of all those old UK exclusive Marvel comics. No, it's not Talotny like destroys their bodies or whatever, and then she tells Splendid AP to put them back together, but he doesn't understand time, so he puts them all throughout different eras, and they all realize, oh, we're just gonna die thousands of years in the past.
Oh, okay, so that's what it's referring to. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And do you remember at the beginning of the comic where Leia's kind of walking up, and then you see the stormtrooper helmets, and she's like, stormtrooper helmets? They look like they've been here for ages, you know? And then later on, you get the explanation as to why.
Yep.
I think even on Wikipedia, technically Talotny kills Leia briefly.
Yeah,
in that story. That's
Oh,
listed on her Wikipedia page that she dies briefly. Like,
in like parentheses briefly, and it's
Didn't she also die in Splinter the Mind's Eye briefly until Luke brought her
at
back?
this point,
Yeah,
Luke revived her. Yeah.
We need to embrace the Star Wars style of death. You can just come back sometimes.
Yeah,
somehow Leia returned.
It's still not as overused as the Marvel method of coming back from death.
Oh yeah,
that's right. Yeah. There was some interesting reference to the Star Raiders of Star World and the Tooth Demon adventure. C-3PO going through time. I thought that was kind of cool, and they're all listed as like apocryphal stories, right? Because I think that's how they're kind of like, that's the metatextual part of it that you were mentioning, Al. It was like they're considered apocryphal in our world to like the Star Wars canon, the EU canon, and then they're also kind of considered apocryphal within the world of Star Wars itself, right? Within the story itself. Sorry, go ahead.
Hex and Q9 just stop in the middle of like a wasteland to argue about canon. I love them. I love them so much.
They're on their way to the temple, and they're just like
or when they're descending down the staircase.
Yeah, they're just
and they just stop on the steps and banter. It's so good.
I love that the book is so big that they can just do that, it works so well, And I love the relationship between Q9 and Hex, because like reading it, I was like, Hex is such a real one, and so is Q9. Like they're so cool together. Like Q9 has to be one of the coolest droids out there.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's a beautiful relationship. You get the sense that they. Alex, are you with us?
At the end.
Oh, I've been here. I haven't had anything to add.
Oh, okay. You were gonna say especially at the end of the book, yeah.
What Q9 does in the aftermath of their adventure there, and when they go back to the council chamber there, and we'll get to that.
You can talk about we're not going in any type of order.
So all right. Well, where one of the counselors is kind of like, he's being a little bit of a nuisance, and then
Chancellor Hennepin, I think his name is.
Yeah, and then Q9's just like continuously like bantering back and forth with him until he just gets like so fed up, and he like cuts his head off with his saw blade, and I'm just like, I was reading that and I was like, oh my god, and then they talk about like this dark essence leaving him, and then everyone's just stunned as to what the hell just happened. He's like, oh yeah, like I sniffed him out. He was like a dark entity, like being controlled and by the demons of Otherspace, and everyone's just like, what the fuck? Like, what is he talking about?
There's a picture of that. I'm gonna share that picture.
Yeah,
screen share that picture.
I remember reading that. It was
really
cool. That was
really
definitely
great how it's.
I'm
sorry.
I was going to say that was just like a big moment. I just had my jaw on the floor when that happened.
Yeah.
It was really great how it like made some of the people second guess in the historical council chamber, because it's like all of this stuff is fanciful if it's and sounds ridiculous if it's not on your doorstep, if you're not witnessing it. And for many of the people in that room, this was their first time witnessing some of this stuff that's being talked about in the manuscript. So it's kind of opening minds, right?
Yeah, look at that.
I love how you can like see like Q9's little like saw blade.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Q9.
The art in just the entire book, but it's just phenomenal. It's I love it so much.
The art's so beautiful.
It just makes the book for me. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting scene. There was one thing I wanted to jump back to earlier. There is references within. It's when they're talking about time travel. And I think it's Q9 or Hex brings up the fact that Palpatine reused aesthetic choices from the past.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
like SWOTOR,
like King Otis and stuff. That was
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
and it seemed like a metatextual kind of way of explaining why the costumes in SWOTOR and the
Are so-
uniforms in SWOTOR
Yeah.
look so
I
similar
love that.
to-
That was
such a cool reference.
And then
Present
they mentioned how like
props.
Darth Vader's armor is like
Oh, yeah.
kind of based off of like a really ancient Sith Lord's armor and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
King Addis and
Mhm.
Ward
Right.
Null. Yeah.
Mhm. That
And
was so
Tula-
cool. Oh,
Tulak
interesting.
Horde has that kind of armor too, right?
yeah.
because that's something that's always bothered me. Is like everything
Mhm.
looks so similar as years
Yeah.
ago, but if you're just embrace that, that's such a good idea. It's like it looks the same because everybody bases it off of these ancient warriors and
Yeah.
paintings and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
the
a
one
really
thing
good
I'll
call.
say, the one thing I will say about that kind of, I don't know, always kind of, I assume that was the case, but if he was able to do that, and I think they even mentioned like nobody brought it up or nobody noticed or something like that, but how could historians not notice that he was using? It's like it's almost like, okay, this is gonna, I'm gonna bring the Nazis into it. But like,
It's like we hired Hugo Boss.
4,000 years from now, someone starts using like Nazi ideal or symbology.
Mm.
If there's like an empire in the future, and it's like nobody, it's conceivable, I suppose, but like nobody's gonna point that out or say anything about it. I don't know, that kind of
It's
stretches
like
my.
if right now the British monarchy had their guards who like stand outside start to wear Roman centurion
Yeah,
design.
yeah.
What's that
Clothing.
show where they're like, "Are we the baddies?"
I think that might be Monty Python.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be Monty Python. But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this book for me, and Alex will probably have a lot to say about this too, because we were talking about it earlier, was this idea of the origin of humans and the dying Earth theory, the dying Earth motif. Do you want to talk a bit about that, Alex?
I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, and I've read the whole thing now, so I have a little bit more context. But as for what Chapter 2 kind of teases at, it asks a lot of questions as why is there in the Star Wars galaxy so many near-human species, and why are there humans around the entire galaxy when no one truly knows the origins of where humans come from? They assume it's Neutron, or a lot of people do, but that's not a confirmed theory. It's just like the most applied, but then again, it's people are like, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense how that would work. So it's a thing of, so Star Wars begins with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So that implies that the Milky Way does exist in Star Wars. And so the book will dive into that a lot more, but it teases a lot in Chapter 2, or not Chapter 2, in Book 2.
Sounded like Bane there, like as you were talking.
That's because Alex is Bane. Spoilers.
Yeah.
But you meant Bane from Batman, right? Not Darth Bane. Because whenever I think Bane now, I think Darth Bane. So.
No one cared who I was when I put on the mask.
There was one part that I kind of wanted to read out because I think it's like the central question of supernatural encounters, or what it's getting. It's on page 92. This is Hex starting. You're playing psychologist again, I warned. I should have that module removed while you're sleeping. And then Q9 says, I suspect that you're just annoyed that I'm right. This is not some academic itch you wish to scratch. You're looking for the answers to the big questions that have always intrigued thinking beings. Why are we here? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Is there something greater that had set everything in motion? Is there a purpose to it all? The ramifications of meaninglessness, implicit in the idea that death is the ultimate cessation of everything, is the most terrifying thought in the galaxy. When I read that, I put it down for a second in the book, and I just had to kind of sit with that thought for a bit. And I was like, whoa. What happened to like funny lightsaber battles? And
I know.
I'm turning 25 here very soon, so I've been thinking a lot about like the passage of time and whatever. So this has already been a question on my mind.
Right.
When I read that, I was like, "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me?"
It only gets worse with age, or better. I don't know, actually.
Also,
What's
speaks
great-
to sci-fi sorry, go ahead.
What's great is under that quote, then we have humor. So we have an
Yeah.
injection of levity right back with a quick, witty snapback, a witty comeback from Arhul, and it just makes them such an engaging pair to watch because it's intelligent, but it's also funny. And I was like laughing my way through some of this, while like you said, there's bits that you could just ponder. There's such profound, there's such profound stuff in silly lightsaber battles in Star Wars now.
Yeah. Alex, I think you were going to say something.
I was just gonna say, and it speaks to kind of what a lot of sci-fi, not that Star Wars is exactly sci-fi, but a lot of sci-fi deals with that, the question of where we are, where we're going, what's our origin, and the mysteries of the vast galaxy out there. And so it's very much harkens to a lot of that. Like you think of Alien, and it may not be asking those necessarily big questions, but does add some mystery there. Like when you see that dead body on the ship or whatever, and you're like, what is that thing? And then it asks all these questions that Prometheus sort of kind of answers, and then doesn't do that, but
Right.
stuff like that. So
He sort of kind of answers. I actually really enjoyed Prometheus, but I saw it like months after it had come out in theaters and people had already panned it at that time. I remember I went to the theater. It was like one of the last days it was playing and it was completely empty. And I just got to sit there in an empty theater watching Prometheus and I had a really good time.
yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. Yeah, it reminds me of when I watched Dune recently, the new one, because
Yeah.
there was almost no one in that theater except for my friends, and they all kept bugging me, asking me questions about it because they didn't read the book. So
That's funny. Well, it was a pretty faithful adaptation. There was, I think, only like one major scene missing that I thought of. But yeah, yeah. There's other stuff in here. I was going to ask who here has actually read The Fourth Precept. I know Brennan has.
that's
Maxine,
the Visionaries comic,
Yeah.
right?
It's not Visionaries, it's Tales, Star Wars Tales, I
Tales,
believe.
sorry, Tales.
Yeah.
It's Visionaries.
Is it Visionaries?
Yeah.
I might have. Could you guys refresh me because I feel like I have read it, but I also
There's not
don't
much
think I
reading
have.
involved in that one.
So that one is
Yeah, it's all
like,
pictures.
yeah, it's 8 pages devoid of words, and it depicts a battle between a manifestation of dark and a manifestation of light. They have futuristic lightsabers or light-based weaponry, and they're fighting each other in a dance or a duel across the stars themselves. We see futuristic-looking technology. We see Coruscant. We see all these different parts of the cosmos, and they're just battling throughout it. And in the end, they merge, and it's a semblance between light and dark. True balance, maybe, as they form into a new object. And there's been a lot of debate in the expanded universe fandom. Is this the first story in order? Is this like the Big Bang of Star Wars or something like that? Or is this the end? Is this the apocalypse of Star Wars? Because boom, explosion as they like join together, and then there's nothing more. So it's very poetic. It's very artsy, as a lot of Visionaries is, and it's a very interesting story. So do we take it as actually happening? And Supernatural Encounters here kind of cast doubt about that, saying it's a hollow art piece or something like that.
Yeah, we can talk about the 4 precepts. So I wrote them down. Do not harm any living being. Do not steal. Do not exploit for personal gain. And then the 4th precept is do not utter false speech. And so Supernatural Encounters links it back to an individual, I think an Athorian, who is a member of the Order of the Canted Circle.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Canted Circle.
love
Yeah.
the reference.
Yeah. And suggests that the 4th precept was uttering false speech, that was not real or fake. Which again, I mean, everything is cast into doubt. But I feel like if we're going to reach a place of epistemological truthfulness, then we need to start from a place of doubt, right? I don't know. That sounded more profound in my head than it did when I actually uttered it.
No, it sounded profound.
I think that kind of like encapsulates Supernatural Encounters, both the conflict within and without.
I agree.
That Canted Circle reference.
You liked it, yeah?
For it.
I know you're a big fan of
Plagueis
Plagueis.
references.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
I still like to consider the fourth precept as having occurring. Although it does mention that literally the comic itself is practically in universe as a part of this code is like a hollow show or a hollow film or something like that. It's said to be artsy and controversial, which I thought was Joe's way of acknowledging the real world controversy and debate around the story. Right, he does that a lot, which I thought was cool. So I like to think it still happens, but maybe this Ithorian and his musings were prophetic in the end.
Yeah, and there's stuff that's hinted in this book that I know because I kind of know what happens in book 3 from having heard people talk about it. But I know is like relevant later on, like the symbolism of 4. You know, the elder races, the origins of humanity, and all that stuff that Alex was talking about earlier. One thing that I thought was very interesting was this concept of the fourth precept talks about like violence as creation and salvation. Like this notion of violence is like both creation and salvation. So it's like at the end of the fourth precept, how like those two beings kind of like merge together and then create a new universe in their wake or something like that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that tie into Star Wars itself? Like the violence created through the Galactic Civil War and Clone Wars creates, in one case, the New Republic, in the other case, the Empire.
I think so. I think, and there was someone who was asking the other day, I think I'm Brennan on your server, it's like, why are there so many wars in Star Wars? And it's like, well, that's part of the name, right? But but there may be other forces at work, as we'll come to find out.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you for joining us.
And I'll say, book 3 gets into that a lot, is to like, a big like reason there's a lot of wars is it's usually at the fault of humans. Whether it's like,
it's so great.
Yeah, and they get into like why like they have that nature, because like, when they delve into the elder races and which races were basically created first, and humans were not among them. But humans are kind of more like the intruder on the galaxy,
the invasive species.
That's right.
The way we see it, like in Star Wars, are like, oh yeah, humans are the dominant species. They must have been among the first. They, they're just normal here.
They're everywhere, right? In Star Wars. Yeah.
But then you learn that they're more of the interloper here. They're not the ones that are native here. Like they're the bothersome people.
It's true of real life as well. Like an insect from Asia gets introduced into the ecosystem in somewhere in North America, and it'll spread and potentially wipe out and minimize the original inhabitants of that area.
Yeah.
Invasive species are dangerous. And as we'll talk about later, humans also practically bring sin itself into the galaxy, which I think is just so perfect.
Yeah.
Another thing I really liked is Joe goes out of his way to acknowledge that humans can interbreed with a lot of species in Star Wars for some reason. This is how I know Joe's a good guy. He's my kind of author, because all the little things about Star Wars that kind of irritate me, like, oh, why does this happen? Oh, the chronology doesn't quite line up. He's going through and he's like, I'm fixing it. The Legends time, I'm fixing it. I'm fixing why are humans so prevalent? Why can they interbreed with everything? Where do they come from? Fixing everything.
This is very true as well. But yeah, I think it harkens back to the whole maybe like the Eden myth and the fall from grace. And I say myth, but for some people it's truth. I didn't mean to insult anybody. But the Eden story and the fall from grace, it's like humans are the ones who have original sin. It's like our burden to bear. There was one really cool quote that I took note of on page 106. It goes something like, "Do you bring her pain? No, only knowledge. That is the worst kind of pain." and the symbolism there is again, it goes back to Eden, right? It's like you eat from the tree of knowledge, and that brings pain because you're cast out of paradise. Right? Oh, that's the worst kind of pain. I thought that was really funny because it's like reading this book where I'm getting all this knowledge downloaded into my head, and it's like, this is so painful, but at the same time, I'm very interested.
I was gonna say, like, sorry, go ahead.
No,
please go for it.
Well, I was gonna say, like, during like peak COVID, we were all stuck at home. All I had was books, and that was good. And I had news, right, and different things like that. So I would be consumed by that. There was a lot of knowledge in my head, and I was not happy with that time. And I've in the last year, and maybe from a certain point of view, maybe I've become less wise in doing so, but I've just tried to not pay that much attention. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, and I think it's a similar thing with Lovecraft and what this book will get into, that maybe some things are better off not knowing.
Yeah.
That's actually a really interesting point. One of the things that really stood out to me was one of the conversations where Q9 and Hex are just walking around hell, just hanging out. They have a conversation about ignorance, and it's actually a legitimately really well thought out debate on ignorance. Like, some people, they just do not have the time in the day to learn everything, learn about politics, learn about anything. They just have to survive. Whereas the Q9 is like, you should learn anyway. It's your duty to learn or whatever. And I thought that was that to me was like, oh, that's good. That's good stuff right there. Is actually having like something to say about what's going on in reality, which I really liked.
Mm-hmm. And I want to bring up a big part of book 2 is Arkan Ood, the supercomputer.
Let's get a picture of her. I'll find a picture of her while you keep.
Beautiful art piece for her.
Yeah. And I believe she's like the sister computer to Mistress Nemos, who is
or the keeper. She's the sister computer, the keeper. On Assyria.
And then like she kind of explains a little bit of Otherspace and what like lurks out here and like the weird like esoteric secrets, and she kind of pushes Arhul on his journey a bit.
And there's Ariana.
Ariana was fantastic.
I was about to ask what you guys thought of her, because I felt immediately uneasy.
Schizophrenic.
I continued to be confused and befuddled and on edge every time her character was being written. What did you guys think of her?
Yeah, I felt that way too. And like her first like appearance is her like taking a sword out of her mouth. And then
that's the never-ending story type of stuff that Supernatural.
Oh my god!
And she's just ready to kill, and then another one where she's like asked by Arkan Ood to like connect to the computer. She just goes and twists her head off and puts it on the thing. And I remember reading that, and I was in school, so I'm just sitting there outside my class, and I was like, oh my god, because I just didn't expect her to be like. She twisted her head off and just lifted it clean off her neck, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then further, where I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a companion then. She's going to be part of the story going forward. So they're like picking up companions here. Oh, is she going to have a fun little banter and relationship with Q9? Is she going to learn what it's like to be human through Q9 and Arhul? Nope.
Boy, was I wrong.
Nope.
And there's the artwork there. Looks great. As usual, the artwork in this book is spectacular.
I know. It's so good. I'm just going to leave it up for a little bit.
Looks a lot cooler than the Marvel version.
Would anyone have pictured that, though, for picturing a supercomputer?
Oh, no.
Like,
no, not at all.
So I'm curious what direction the artist was given. If this was what Joe was picturing, or if he just gave the artist free reins, because it's very great.
Yeah, it's awesome. But it does kind of describe it as a skull, right? So that really comes through in the art. Terrifying to get all this eldritch and secret knowledge from this skull-like being.
And he taught like Hex mentions how like the screen or like the color will change like depending on like what he would say and how like Arkan Ood would respond and everything. It's so cool, and the way it's written is just masterful.
Maxine, did you catch the Abeloth reference on page 103?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
Of course I did. I did. I love Abeloth.
Incarnation of the 3 additional celestials depicted earlier. Later joined by a 4th, I added, pointing down to the floating image. But the 4th doesn't come from the same origin point as the others. In fact, its origin is not indicated at all. So not a celestial. It's drawn differently, grotesquely even. Something about the eyes and the smile After I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, Abeloth. Okay.
I love that. When I was reading that, like, you know, actually, when I was reading that, I was in the box office at work, and like I was sitting there, I was slapping the table, and I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "It's Abeloth," because y'all know I love Abeloth, so it's like I freaked out.
Hello, Matt. Joe gave some direction of what he wanted, but the artist had some freedom. Yeah, I think that's usually how it is, right? You got to give the artist kind of freedom to spread their wings. And thank you for joining us.
Artistic liberties, artistic freedom, artistic vision.
Matt,
I don't think I would be able to handle
the book if you've started reading.
Yeah, Matt, let us know how far you are.
Yeah, and by the way,
Matt, did you finish it?
Yeah.
You said you'd knock this thing out of the park in a day and a half, Matt.
Yeah, you did say that you read books so fast. You say you're like, if you just lack a book,
All
you
right.
just keep going.
Let's you guys can berate Matt on your own channels.
Earlier today, I was actually watching his latest video.
Sorry, Matt.
What I love about this book is that, like, again, like, it starts hinting at things that we're probably going to later read about, like the cosmic wars and the origins of the Osirians. We learn basically the Osirians, what happened to them, right? They were transported to Otherspace. They were transported to this planet Eartha. They lived underground to a large extent and died out, essentially.
The notes on the back of the book say that Eartha is a reference to something else. I forget what the name of the novels were, but so it's like another thing where, like,
is it the Dying Earth novels?
Yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I forget. I don't have my notes with me. Did
the story of the Osirians being over there in Otherspace and dying out remind anyone of, like, the lost colony of Roanoke? Because that's where my mind went to.
Sure.
Because it was like they were moved, but then, like, they were moved because there was a threat, and then they just vanished, right?
That's really good, actually. And I also want to bring up, it's like when they get to, like, the kind of ruined city, they mention how, like, the structures are very, like, earthly. They look like earth buildings, and then that's how they get into the topic of Zrek and ET and the whole thing. And they're like,
where do humans come from?
Yeah, they're like, doesn't this sound familiar to what Zrek described in his, like, supposed adventure to this world filled with humans and stuff? Like,
and then my mind is going, is this, like, supposed to be our Earth? Our Earth exists in Otherspace, but it's like post-apocalyptic. We've destroyed ourselves. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you, like, scroll in, I'll try and scroll in, but you can almost see, like, girders.
Oh wow, looks just like New York.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's, like, this large edifice here, and that's nothing like we have in our own planet. But, like, I'm almost, like, looks like skyscrapers that have been kind of just worn down over thousands of years.
Perhaps intentionally.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah.
To look like that.
Hi, Lance.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just gonna leave that up for a bit because the art is just wonderful. But yeah, I know I don't think it's a direct reference to Battlestar Galactica because there, I think, are later on spoilers. Not in this book, at least that I didn't see, but Alex may know because he's obviously read the end notes already. But it reminded me of Battlestar Galactica, like, spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched the show, but they find Earth and it's an irradiated wasteland, essentially.
Yeah.
Ooh, wow.
Ooh, it's a good reference.
Very, very much like this. Yes. Well, thank you for popping in to say hello. We will watch your career with great interest.
There's something so eerie as well about this. And that's why Joe writes horror so well. As you'll see in books 3 and 4, it really goes into, like, fully into the horror elements that are kind of teased early on. But, like, the Star Wars horror novels, like Red Harvest and Death Troopers, had me uneasy in, like, every line I was reading. It had me nervous. This had me even more nervous. Just the idea of being in Otherspace, which we've heard about so many times from West End Games. So I've read all those source books, and it's, like, already, like, built up as being this horrible place of ghouls and ghastly abominations in my mind. But being on a planet, just you and your droid, that no one else is on, that's something that is so hard to picture, because we're so used to, even if you're, like, alone in a ghost town, if you're out on a farm somewhere in the Midwest and there's nothing around for miles, this is a whole planet that
Yeah.
is just empty and desolate. And that is terrifying, especially with what you don't know is there, which turns out to be a giant skull-like supercomputer and her unhinged sword-toting android. It's just so terrifying.
I think we have
Yeah.
some
If you want to,
early concept art for what you were
Yeah.
just talking about, Brennan.
Love that. And then
if you want to see an example of that in film, watch the movie The Last Man on Earth. It's also based on a book, which is apparently
Okay.
good, but I haven't read it. Where it's the last man on Earth going around killing all the vampires who took out the rest of the people on Earth, and
Okay, that sounds
all the
vaguely
daylight
familiar.
scenes. Yeah, all the daylight scenes are just empty roads and empty buildings. It's just him.
hey.
Is
I
that,
also-
not what, is that not what I Am Legend is based off of?
yes, also I Am
Yeah.
Legend.
No.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
I'd
me
also
too.
mention, like, you know, what going off what Brendan said, like where, like, you know, usual like horror novels in the EU, you know, Death Troopers, for instance, like it's very surface level, it's very physical. You know, you're afraid of the zombies, they're gonna eat you. But when you're in Otherspace and you're reading this, you're afraid of what you don't know.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
Yeah.
because it's just such this,
The greatest fear,
desolate,
fear of the unknown.
yeah, it's just this desolate like pocket
And
galaxy.
you're not afraid of like the shadow itself, but you're afraid
Yeah.
of what's beyond it,
in it,
what's in
yeah.
there.
So it's like freaky to think about. You're like, you don't know Otherspace, like, you know, you've read the source books and stuff, but like, you know, I haven't. So like, I don't like, I know kind of base level what's in
Yeah.
Otherspace. So I'm just like, they're like, I'm experiencing this with like Hex and Q9. I'm like, I don't know what lurks in there. Like, I have no idea. And then, you know, getting into further books, and then you learn what's there, and you're just like, holy shit, like this is lurking there the entire time. And you know, it's freaky.
And Q9 and Arhul are like aware of like the Spacer's Tales,
Yeah.
right? And Spacer's Tales are like, to me, it's like a cowboy talks about being out west and something spooky happens. You know, it's like these Spacer's Tales. They're out on the front lines. They're off doing spacer things, I guess.
Yeah.
Like Watkins Milt, apparently. And they're off doing their thing, and they go into Otherspace, and they come back with these horrifying tales.
Mm.
And these are tales that Q9 and Arhul and others have heard, and now they're willing to go in there, and it's it's great.
I think we can say without a doubt that Q9 and Arhul have read a lot of the EU.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like it's kind of like how Han in A New Hope says, kid, I've been to one end of this galaxy and I've seen a lot of strange stuff. So it's like we're seeing like really strange stuff, you know? But,
Yeah.
cool.
The one thing that Lovecraft does well is just makes you feel like you're an insignificant blip in like a much wider, scarier universe. And that's what this book does. It makes me think
It really
like
does.
all these minor conflicts like the Great Galactic War and the Galactic Civil War and stuff like that are all, and I think this is going to become even more apparent from what I know of later books, but like are all just they're like mummers farces. They're all just puppet shows, right? It's all like there's bigger forces at work that people are just not even aware of, and for good reason, because if they were aware of them, they would go insane, like you do in a Lovecraft story.
It makes all the complaints about overpowered beings in Star Wars go mute when you hear like about Luke Skywalker being overpowered, or you hear about Valkorian / Vitiate / Tenebra from SWTOR being overpowered, or Dallin Merrick, or Abeloth even, and you go, oh. I mean, we haven't gone through all the books yet, but you go, oh, Abeloth's like a little girl in comparison.
I know.
Things out there.
We were talking about this last stream, how the Rakatan Empire and everything, how it in the EU as we know it is just like built up to be this big, like infinite empire, and then we learned that it was like 500 planets, and then they were just this little speck in history, you know. And that's just crazy to think about, because as Marcel said, there's just bigger forces at work that are just on such a grander scale than the mortal turbulences that we know. You know?
Exactly. The Rakata were puppets. They were puppets of the larger forces, right?
And then, you know, what Alex said, and like the power scaling of the EU, it's like, you know, you see people who are completely like uneducated on the EU, and they just go off of like Wikipedia. Like lately, they're talking about Abeloth and everything, like, oh yeah, the most powerful entity in Star Wars, this, you know. And then you're like, but Abeloth is like, compared to like someone like Talatani or the Supreme Maker or like Typhogem or something, and you're just like, they make Abeloth look like, you know, a Jawa.
D tier.
I know she's just like, and admittedly, like reading Fate of the Jedi before Supernatural Encounters came out, I'm just like, oh wow, like Abeloth's insane. And then you learn about Telatni and all the old ones and their power, and you're just like, holy crap, like Abeloth's power is like not even on the same scale.
Yeah.
It's
and it definitely makes without getting into it, I'll say it makes it. I never found her particularly that interesting, I'll say, for me, when I read Fate of the Jedi. And but
Blasphemer.
this book made me, much like with Telatni Throws a Shape, it just gave me a whole new perspective on that character.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing. I think one of the editors, Kyle, has talked about this, but and shout out to Kyle. But like this, I think this book will really make you appreciate Fate of the Jedi more, especially for people who are kind of on the fence about it, like me and Alex. And maybe it wasn't our favorite series in the world, but
we appreciate the Killicks more.
Yeah, the Killicks for sure. There was a lot in this book about the Celestials and the Maker, and I'm sure it's going to be even further expanded upon when we get into the down the rabbit hole. But I feel like we're already down the rabbit hole at this point.
But, we're in it.
They talked about how the Maker, let me read here. It says they talk about the cosmic force, and the wills are advanced microscopic light forms who direct the midichlorians in each living cell to split. This brings the energy field known as the living force, which in turn generates more life, sustaining the wills who communicate a beneficent purpose to each living being through the whisperings of the midichlorians within. So this concept, I believe, is from George Lucas.
Yeah.
Right? Like Joe's not just pulling this out of anywhere. This is from like a George Lucas interview and him talking about his sequel trilogy plans and his plans for midichlorians in general. A lot of people, it won't sit right with them, right? Like talking about midichlorians, but I think it's fascinating, and
I think it actually brings back to what. See, the thing is that people don't sit and wait, because it actually, I mean, it never did, because people are stupid. Sorry, but it never took away the mystical aspects of the Force. It simply explained how people are able to use it. It didn't explain the Force itself, which was a different thing. So this book even goes further into making it more mystical than I think even the movies themselves do. So I think it's perfectly fine what the prequels do, and this book only should help you. If you're a prequel hater and you feel like the prequels ruined that mystical aspect of the Force, well, then here you go. Here's
100%.
I think that something in the real world that people think about is they think that science and magic are separate from each other, right?
Or that science and religion don't work.
They can't coexist. But what science is, it's basically prescribing how it works to everything around us. Gravity is magic, but we know how it works. If magic existed, we'd use science to describe how it works. So labeling something midichlorian, labeling something wills, that's science to show how the magic is working.
It's the same thing if you can understand how to drive a car and operate a car and do all that stuff. That doesn't mean you understand the inner workings of a car, right?
No.
And understanding the inner workings of a car doesn't negate the fact that you know how to drive a car. It just means you understand the car better.
Exactly.
There's an interesting concept here where Arhul talks about, he's like, so you're saying that there's this all-powerful maker who made everything, but at death, our personality cease to be and our energy carries on? That's rubbish. So like he's talking about something like this Buddhist concept almost, like where, you kind of join Brahman, and when you enter Nirvana and you become kind of part of the universe. And then Archon Ood says, that is not what I said. Though it is what the Jedi taught, they did not have the full picture nor comprehend the mind and the heart of the cosmic force. And I think we see that to a large extent. We see that, after death, people like Obi-Wan, for instance, are able to come back. They're able to, like, although they're part of the Force, they've become one with the Force, as we say. They're able to reassert their personalities.
Projection.
Into the physical world. And also, I mean, this is going to be a new canon reference, but there's a story, and from a certain point of view, A New Hope, where I believe Obi-Wan is visited by the ghost of Qui-Gon, the Force ghost of Qui-Gon, right?
Right?
And the first part of the story, as I recall it, is it kind of takes this like overview, like this overview of Qui-Gon re-establishing his identity Like he has to like basically
Yeah.
like pull himself out of the Force stream essentially, and it's like, oh yes, I was a person. My name was Qui-Gon Jinn. I lived, and like he
Yeah.
just sort of like slowly comes back to himself. So it's like this idea that yeah, we do merge with like the universal consciousness, but we still retain elements of our own personality. I think it's just fascinating to talk about that kind of thing. And you know, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what your real world religious beliefs are, but just even from the context of Star Wars, where we know people like become one with the Force.
And the fact that Arhul is someone who's doubting, who's saying it's rubbish at the beginning, is phenomenal writing.
Exactly.
The way that the prologue shows him being like, "Oh, mere months ago, I wouldn't have believed the stuff that I know now," and they show it. They show the progression. They show, "Oh, that's all rubbish. That's all ridiculous notions. That's fanciful rubbish." And he gradually, as he's digging deeper, as he's following the truth where it leads, is uncovering stuff that he doesn't want to believe, but he's going to gradually learn to accept. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, Exarchum, this is what we were getting at. Goodbye to Alex. Thank you for joining us. He had to head out. He will be missed. He will be hopefully here for the next one. But that's what we were getting at. This idea that like the Wills and the midichlorians would have played a larger role in Lucas's proposed sequel trilogy. And I mean, like, I know he had like a few ideas of sequel trilogies kind of knocking around in his head, but this is one of the ones that I had heard about. Probably for the best that it didn't come to pass, in the sense that I feel like this goes down easier as like a book than it would ever in a movie. I think it might be just way too metaphysical for some.
To sort of jump off of something Alex said earlier, I think Supernatural Encounters does a fantastic job of explaining the midichlorians in a way that is more palatable.
Yeah.
And I think if George tried to like say that in a movie, it would probably be incomprehensible, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I think would not go over well. You know, people already have issues with the prequels. I don't. I love them, but I do recall when they came out, there was a big divide over whether people loved them or hated them, or thought George was a genius, or thought he was a hack. And you know, I think.
And there still
he probably
is,
did it. He did himself well for sure. Yeah, he did himself a favor by stepping away. I almost feel like.
Yeah. And there's still the midichlorian debate. You know, I still get into that today.
It rages on.
Absolutely,
Yes.
and you know, I still get into it today with certain people, who shall not be named. But you know, it really doesn't take away from the fantastical elements in the
100% agree.
It doesn't.
You know,
As a
Yeah.
science fiction Star Trek nerd, I enjoy it even more. It's like trying to prescribe something science-y to something that's supposedly in the realm of science fantasy, science fiction, space opera, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, if you're going to be in a universe where you can travel across space in a matter of hours, like across the universe in a matter of hours, you're going to want to know how the wizards lift things.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It only makes sense
Like
that they
you're not
would
gonna
try
figure
and
that out.
scientifically explain it.
Hyperspace would seem like magic to like the gels and the tongs from the Gel Tong War. If you told them what hyperspace was, they'd be like, magic, black magic.
Yeah.
Right. But you know, it's so technologically advanced, and like you said, they're gonna be like, wait a minute, how do some people lift stones and some people don't? You know.
That's like if somebody showed this to someone from 1900. You'd be like,
yeah, exactly.
That's a magic rectangle.
Yeah, it's a magic rectangle, exactly. And yeah, I had heard this, Darth Sidious. I had heard that he envisioned the Wills having that role.
If anyone's read the Star Wars comics, it's George's original
draft
script. Yeah, I think the Wills are mentioned pretty early on, and that was like the title too. At some point, it was the Journal of the Wills.
That's right. Interesting to see these early concepts getting baked back into the lore through Supernatural Encounters.
Yeah.
And in the end notes, Joe mentioned several times that all he wanted to do was stick to George's vision. And he mentions over and over again throughout the end notes. I've only read the first like 5 pages of end notes. They stretch on and on. They're called the infernal end notes for a reason, I believe. But they just stretch on, and over and over, I just see George Lucas with quotes, and it's showing how he's incorporating George's vision back into Star Wars. A
Exactly.
vision that wasn't necessarily upheld within the EU for the entire time, but it's being baked back into it.
Yeah. And then
The midi-chlorians' older brother will be the maxi-chlorians.
And then towards the end of the chapter, when the evil forces, or the enemy, as Archon Ood calls them, are kind of closing in on Hex and Q9, and like, and they're making their escape from Otherspace. You know, they're in their ship, they're flying, trying to get out of the wormhole. And then like all of these just grotesque, like really weird, like some of them are just like disembodied tentacles. Like
Yeah,
I'll get the picture.
These are just
That was
monsters.
just,
He's like, these can't be classified. They're just monsters.
Yeah, and then they're just like these nameless horrors, and like Hex himself is like trying not to like throw up his lunch and stuff, and he's just like completely like revolted. And then there's like and there they are, like, what even, like, that's amazing though, like, and just the way it's described is so grotesque, and like, ooh, I love it. And then
there's like an elephant in there on the side over here.
Yeah. And then at the end, like when they're kind of making their way out, they have like this wormhole that gets like put around them by these like elemental like beings. Like there's a like, you know, Ariana like kind of like turns on them and like starts like being
and they're asking her for help at this point.
Yeah.
And she's what, summoning them forward or something like that?
She's like acting as a beacon. She's like, yeah, kill these guys. Like, and then these elemental beings like come out of the blue, and they assist Arhul in his escape, and then like they kill Ariana, and then like it's just like this fire guy, and I'm like, these guys are cool. Like, and then they just kind of allow him to escape.
They use Ariana to they basically Q9 jury rigs her to the ship so that they can use her as a navigational device to get out of Otherspace. Very quickly, I should have done this at the beginning of the stream. Hopefully people are still watching this at this point. But the rough plot of book 2 is that now that Q9 and Hex are in Otherspace, they travel to this world called Eartha, essentially, whereas the beacon was leading them. They meet after going into this hall of giant statues, which we can talk about in a bit, which turn out to be like the elder races. They meet Archon Ood and her kind of like daughter droid Ariana, and Archon Ood is like a giant supercomputer, and she tells Arhul and Q9 about, it kind of like hints at the formation of the galaxy and hints about what happened, you know, where humans come from, and talks about what happened to the Osirians. And that's kind of like the only direct kind of answer that we get at this point. But what happened to the Osirians? But then their conversation is cut short because these Lovecraftian monstrosities finally zero in on Q9 and Hex, and they have to escape the planet, and they manage to escape back to our space. But yeah, sorry, Ken, was that you? Did you want to say something?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
If I could jump off something Maxine said real quickly.
For sure.
I'm glad I did this last night, but I went back and I read those UK exclusive Marvel comics where the Keeper it comes from, where her sister comes from, and the fire guy is like Luke's friend in that story, and I think it's Pizzazz 1, and it really makes me appreciate those Marvel comics, which, to be honest, I really did not like. When I first read them, I was like, I hate these. But
reading the genius,
reading the Keeper's World, I was like, I accept that this is in continuity, but
it's like, over there.
Yeah, exactly. But this works it back in, and now it makes it essential, right?
Yes, now it's perfect.
Supernatural Encounters, like the scope of this book, it feels like it's over everything else that I have on this shelf. It feels like this is what all of that's been leading to, right?
Yeah. Very much.
It feels so grandiose.
All the stuff I don't like from the early EU, from like 1977 to like 1986, it's like, I'm going to take this. I'm going to make it fit in the regular continuity and make it awesome. I love
it's
that.
madness, but glorious at the same time. I need to read like a short paragraph because I cannot believe we've gone this long in the stream without talking about this one thing.
Oh man.
Come to us, the second inveigled seductively. You know me. We belong together. I will bestow unto you those deepest and most hidden desires which you have long sought. This and more. For all the riddles of the flesh are open before us, and yours for the taking. Come now, become as one with the wondrous Waru.
Oh, I love it.
Let's go.
Waru.
Waru.
Waru makes his triumphant return, and he has a
Long
crew.
awaited.
He has a crew of Warus.
I know he's got like a whole like band of Warus.
There's one
The
of them
whole
called
Waru crew.
Uradril,
Waru
which is a great
squad.
name. Uradril and Uzultharum.
Uzultharum.
Uzultharum,
Yeah,
thank you. Uzultharum, and I think you had to correct me last time too on that name. I just cannot do it. But Uzultharum and Uradril and Waru. It's like, look at this. Float with us in the endless oceans of Uzultharum. I want to float in the endless oceans of Uzultharum.
I want to go swimming with Luke on Uzultharum.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
Take a dip in the pool of Waru.
There's
You know-
there's
sorry.
some interesting stuff you'll learn in book 3, Marcel, about Uradril and them
Yep.
and the
Uzultharum?
connection
Yeah.
between them and Waru and you know, so it's yeah. I don't
cannot
want to
answer that. Okay. I look forward to learning about the Waru crew, as I've
the
called.
Waru
as I've
Waru
decided to
Waru
call
crew.
everybody
Yeah.
tough guy till the Waru crew show up.
Hashtag
You know how,
Waru crew.
You know how in the Marvel movies at the end it'll say so and so will return?
Yeah.
Vonda and McIntyre should have put into the end of the Crystal Star, Waru will
Waru
return.
will
And
return.
here he did.
That is amazing. I love
You
it.
know, Granny, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially in the context of like, what if the EU never gets continued? Obviously, I hope it does, and I'll continue to advocate for its continuation along a parallel path to the canon storyline. But
100%.
you know, I mean, like, if this is all there ever is that we get like that, you know, I mean, I've only read the first 2 books, granted, but it, you know, it really does kind of seem to like come together, and it doesn't answer every question, but it answers a lot. And it's not going to do it in a way that people are satisfied with. And of course, you know, there's the canonicity debate that rages on, but people accept Hand of Thrawn 45 and his works as like the continuation and the bookend of the expanded universe. So I'm not here to discuss canonicity or anything like that, but I have been thinking about this a lot, and I just want to get others' senses on this. Like, sort of like, do you agree with Granny's comment that this like gives kind of closure on the discontinuation of the EU? You know, we're going to continue to fight for it to continue, and fight's maybe not the right word, but you know, I mean, continue to advocate
Peacefully.
campaign.
Peacefully.
Yeah.
But you know, I say fight as in like, you know, push back against the struggle and that kind of thing. But because we want to see more stories set in that timeline. But to the extent that you know, this might be it. Like, is this satisfying for you based on what you've read so far?
Yeah. I would say like, if like God forbid this is the last of it, like then you know I feel like it would be a good end note for us, you know, like this is like, it's also like the beginning and it's also the end, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
it's just a big book that it encompasses all of it. So if you know, and I hope it's not the last, but if it ever is the last, then I feel like this is a really good like note to leave off on.
For me, it's 1 part yes, or 2 parts yes, 1 part no. This is a great book, at least so far. If it continues, it will be like the grand finale of the EU, and it'll be
Top 3
tying
EU.
together all the stuff, all the little weird things that I don't like, that bother me, that irritate me for some reason because I'm, you know, deranged. But it'll have done all that. But to me, still for me to have the closure, it would be I have to see Luke fade into the Force. That's when I personally get closure.
Yep.
But
that
Fair
would
enough.
short of that, this will be fine for me.
Yeah.
You
And
know
y'all
what's
know
funny?
me.
I-
Sorry, y'all know me.
no.
I gotta see Sword of the Jedi.
Yeah,
Once I
yeah.
get that, then I'll kind of
I've not
You could-
only got to see Sword of the Jedi, I've got to see it go from Crucible to Legacy.
Like,
We need
exactly.
100
Exactly,
books. We need 100 books there. Link it.
You know, everybody does not like Dawn of the Jedi, that book. People talk about, like, I know Brennan put out a recent video, and so did Liam. But I will say that the Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void had a very satisfying ending, which I think could work as the ending for literally any story in the expanded universe, as the entire ending of the expanded universe. Yes. No, it was amazing. It was like a go off into the sunset kind of. Like, when I think of the perfect ending to something, I think of Return of the Jedi. I think of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. These are like perfect endings to sagas. And it's like I'm left in a place where I would love to have more, but you run the risk of diluting the previous stuff. But I'm happy if there's never any more, because I can always cherish those things that exist, right? And this is how I feel about Supernatural Encounters. But at the same time, if the expanded universe were to be continued by Lucasfilm, and then they decided maybe to disregard Supernatural Encounters, to me, this doesn't diminish the value of this work. This work is a masterpiece of continuity and just drawing together so many different sources. And I like the way that it's written. I mean, I've said before, I said on the last stream, I'll say it again this stream, I'm not a huge fan of like the large words being used over and over and over again, because sometimes like it's just kind of like it takes me out of the narrative a bit. But that aside, for the first two books, I've enjoyed everything that I've read immensely.
Yeah.
So, can I speak on the original question, and then all of you just gave me stuff to think about. I could probably talk for an hour about just what you guys said. So on Supernatural Encounters, does it feel like a satisfying ending? I would say yes, and by the author's own admission, no as well, because as he noted on his panel, he doesn't even name all of the elder races. He is not intending this to be the ending. He wants this to continue. He has left plot threads to dangle that he wants other people to come pick up. So while it does function as an ending very well, I accidentally, and I'm going to hate this forever, my eyes laid across the last words of the whole book as I was flipping through to the end notes. And it is beautiful. And it works so well. And so it can be an ending. But at the same time, the author's intending it not to be an ending. Yeah. And on Expanded Universe Continuation, it's written in a really impressive way to where I feel if the EU continued, like really continued, we got new books, new comics, new video games, maybe even a show, who knows? If we got that in the Expanded Universe, I think Supernatural Encounters would still work with the nature of it. If something contradicts, well, you don't even have to go as far as to say Arhul was lying about everything. Just the nature of it, right? He's writing down what he has been told. Yeah. Maybe not everything he's been told is true. Maybe the enemy has distorted some of these words. So I think
it's more about the symbolism than it is about the actual thing.
It could be about the symbolism. Yeah, it could be a myth. It's all done in such a tasteful way to where in its vagueness, it will forever work. And I think if the EU really, truly continued in force, I think it would still work. But does it work as the ending? Yes, but also by the author's own admission, no, right? And so I'm left so mixed because I absolutely adore it. And if we don't get anything else, which will break my heart, I will still be super happy that this is the last thing that we got, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, Granny.
Ken, did you want to add something on that?
I mean, I think so far this book is absolutely fantastic. Like, bless Joe's heart. He is like the greatest guy, and he's created the greatest book I've ever read in my life. But I need my Ben Skywalker stories. I need those to continue. But like this, I feel like could absolutely work as tying up those knots. Little tiny knots in the universe all floating around. Just tie them up for me.
Yeah.
Yes,
but I would prefer a official continuation of the EU.
Me too.
But this does work as a definitive ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I wanted to do this book club and kind of draw it out a bit, right? Well, also because like even with 60 to 70 pages in one stream, there's so much to unpack. I have 78 notes based on there's literally like a note I took for each page. there actually, I wanted to share another picture because I'm determined to share every single picture in this book. But we got a return of, I mean, like it's maybe not a 1-to-1, but an exogorth. Like we kind of see these, we see these creatures in the KOTOR comics, right? Like, or analogous creatures. I don't think it's the same, but like imagine that thing chasing you through space. Absolutely terrifying.
They name drop a Daska Corp.
A Daska, yeah, they
Yeah,
did.
they do.
Yeah, they did. So KOTOR comics reference was amazing.
Another great portion around the Adaskar part, or I believe around that portion, they cast doubt on the timeline regarding the Gel-Tong War in Q9 and Arhul's conversation, which I thought is so great. I am a huge fan of Neutron in Flames. I will say every EU fan, don't start with the Thrawn trilogy. Don't start with Darth Bane. Start with Neutron in Flames.
Darth Sidious was a very funny meme about that with I think it was with Drake that he shares.
Yeah, the true starting point for the EU.
I mean, now it's this technically, but yeah, for sure.
And I think it's great, right, that it like casts into doubt the historical validity. And there's stuff like that in our world. There's debates over dates for certain events. And so there's this debate. Was it really 200,000 years ago? Was it older than that? Was it closer to now than that? It's really well done. And I really loved it. And we'll get that further fleshed out in book 3, a whole chapter. And I just love that era of Star Wars so much. And I just love that they're like debating, did it really happen in 200,000 ABY or not? And I think that was so cool.
And that's the thing is like this is about reimagining or recontextualizing the past. Is that for all this time we've been told that Neutron, or as it later became known, Coruscant, was the birthplace of the humans, right? And it's kind of easy to see in the sense that because it's a human centric universe in the sense that a human created Star Wars and we're humans and we're consuming this, so it's like yeah, of course, like the most developed planet in the galaxy, Coruscant being the entire planet's one big city, is going to be a human origin planet, right? Of course, because we're like the most advanced, we're the best, we're humans.
It's like when humans had the flat Earth thing, where it's like Earth is the center of the universe, right? Because we think so highly of ourselves.
Yes, I believe so. But the Tong eventually later became, as we know, like the original Mandalorians, right? Before they started after the Great Sith War, they started accepting other races.
That's the first. In Tales of Jedi, isn't Mandalore the which one is he?
Is
the first Mandalore?
Indomitable?
Yeah, I think it is the Indomitable. He's a Tong.
We see his face. Yep.
Yeah, I think I thought Mandalore the Ultimate was a Tong as well.
I think he might be, or no.
I think we had a couple.
There's one in between Mandalore the Ultimate and Mandalore the Indomitable. That is a Tong, but I think Mandalore the Ultimate might be a human at that point.
Okay.
There's some kind of retcon in there that kind of like weirdens the timeline.
Oh no, it turns out to be Dr. Demical.
And then the
Ultimate is Tong as well. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
The human things with like the Tong on Coruscant, like that, we're gonna get like really into that in like book 3, and like it's just such a like bigger, more complex event than it's made out to be in other media, because
in the Essential Guide to Warfare,
like now we're really in it, like we're in that time era.
We had a short story that basically Marcel reads it on his channel, and it's my favorite reading of his. I've watched it like 20 times.
De Huerta Verda.
Yeah, I watch it just to hear him say that over and over. No, but that's the in-universe book, and it's depicting this event. So we get like 9 verses from it in the Essential Guide to Warfare of like 300. So it hints that there's this wider conflict, and Joe shows us the wider conflict, as we'll see later on. And when Titus was like, "Wait a minute, wasn't it a human uprising?" Well, yes, but not the way you might think it is. So recontextualizing.
Would you call this an Earth final conflict? Because it's not Earth, though, as we learn. But like that's the thing, is like it casts Supernatural Encounters book 2, and I know we're going to get into this more in book 3, but cast doubt on like, wait a second, maybe humans or the Zells are not from Notron originally. Maybe there's a reason why there was this big conflict. Maybe they're an invader species, right?
Yeah.
And that's really interesting because like I remember I was really interested in kind of knowing what was the human planet in Star Wars. And there were theories back then. And actually Joe captures some of these theories in his book. He talks about how people thought like Tatooine might have been like the original planet Earth.
They mentioned the Duros too, right?
The Duros, right. And I remember like being on the message boards back in the day. I remember reading the Essential Guides to Planets and Moons. And I think I might be wrong on this because it's been a lot of years, but I think that book kind of suggests almost that like Coruscant was like the homeworld of the humans. And so like that notion has been kicking around in people's minds for years and years and years. And this book is like, no, that's not true. This is the real secret history.
That's what I love about the metatextual elements is
Yeah.
it's taking these fan debates and incorporating them into the narrative.
Yeah.
Which I think is really genius. Like
And
even
it'll
the canon
please everyone, you know, because you can be on either side of the debate. You can believe what you want, right? You can be on one side or the other. You can believe what the historians have said. You can believe what Arhul has said. So for the people on the debates, it's done in a way to where both sides can be happy. Both sides can take what they want out of it.
Absolutely.
Yes, you better believe it.
Really?
You better believe it. Yes.
Oh man, Tale of the Iowa Pod. I saw the Siruk creation myth was in there as well with the cosmic egg. Oh man.
Yeah. And I don't know what I should say about it. It is so good. It is so good. He is there. Yes. I'll wait till book 3 to talk about that. But yeah, you'll know it when you come to it. Uh-oh.
Oh, we lost Al.
Oh no, Al.
Did we lose Marcel too? He looks kind of frozen.
Like
there.
Yeah.
He's gone to Otherspace. he's trapped.
He's gone to join the O series.
The enemies got to them.
I know the enemy has come for them. No, look at Marcel, he's frozen. No.
Oh, poor guy.
That's all right.
Well, I was like, all right, we're taking over here.
We're taking over the stream.
Where do you guys fall on the debate over like if the manuscript's real or not? Because like I think everything is truth. What do you guys think?
I think
there's
it
points
depends.
either way, right?
I think it could go honestly either way. I'd be cool with it either way, but we have to just wait and see.
Yeah.
I've only read 2 books, so and I've heard about the 3rd book and how crazy it gets. So can't wait for that.
Okay.
I think the Cosmic Horrors came after me. They tried to
saying that the enemy came after you.
Is that what you said? Okay,
Yeah.
I missed it. That's super awkward. I'm glad that it didn't end the stream though. I don't know. I was like, oh god, I hope it doesn't end the stream. But that's cool how the Tale of the Iowa Pod is in there.
Yeah.
That was so scary.
Yeah, there's a lot of
No,
yeah.
Marcel,
They came for me.
You were frozen on there. You were just like in this like blank state, like just frozen, and we were like, "Oh my god!"
You guys both revealed too many secrets that they didn't want to be known.
That's they've come for me finally. It was only a matter of time. Here, let me pull up. I have to like get my notes back now. I'm all flustered. Excuse me.
And, I'm very excited for our discussion on book 3 because there's so much in it. And I believe it's in. No, is the Starcrow stuff in book 4? Or is that 3? 4. Okay. So yeah. But I know in book 3 they go over like Star Weirds. I see in the comments they kind of go over of their kind of origin and like the Talani and stuff.
We get a mention of the Jebi, which is great.
There's so much.
It's like, man, there's so much good stuff in there.
Here, I want to share.
There's just paragraphs at a time that are just lists of names. But
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that's kind of like almost like biblical, but also reminds me of Tolkien. How he
exactly.
Just,
like, it's like Leviticus or something, right?
Here, I want to share this screen. Here, this is I had to look this up. This is a Clark Ashton Smith quote. So one of the authors that Joe attributes at the beginning of the book to one of his main influences. But and one by one we died, and we're lost in the dust of accumulated time. We knew the years as a passing of shadows, and death itself as the yielding of twilight unto night. I read stuff like that, and I'm like, oh man, it's so cool. I want to get that like tattooed on my body. Just,
A chess piece.
but that's, I don't know. I just think I thought that was really, really neat. And the fact that it made me like do a bit of homework and look up where the quote, because he says, as the great poet of the primary world wrote. So Clark Ashton Smith is the great poet of the primary world. So, you know, I mean, just so you know, and Clark Ashton Smith, as I understand, I hope I'm not wrong on this, was heavily influenced by Lovecraft as well. So it's just like a kind of a literary tradition that you see followed down through the years from Lovecraft to Smith to Bongiorno.
The way that Joe continues to pay homage to people that he likes, to George, to this poet, and as the editors talked about on the Supernatural Encounters panel, they'd find words that they didn't know, and sometimes they'd look it up, and sometimes they'd find that it was a word, and sometimes they wouldn't find anything on the whole internet. And Joe would come back to them with like a picture of some Pulp Fiction book where he'd be like, see, it is a word. And they'd be like, what? And their minds would be blown. He's paying homage to all these old textbooks with wild words that he's pulled out of there. And I think it's so cool. It's the ultimate respect to literature as a whole, not just Star Wars.
For sure. Are you able to answer this, Titus's question?
The Order of the Terrible Glare is touched on. I've not gotten through all of their beliefs yet, I don't believe, but it's touched on. It's in there.
You talked about paying homage, and sorry, was that Al? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, isn't the Terrible Glare that's in Cult Encounters and Blind Fury? I think is the Marvel issue.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, because I remember it's like a offshoot. I forget the order. I think they're an offshoot of the Vindicators, or the Vindicators. No, they were an enemy of the Vindicators. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, and there's a whole like 1 or 2 pages in Cult Encounters about the Order of the Terrible Glare. There's a whole like little section.
We talked about honoring people in the real world, and one of the. And this also kind of intersects with bringing back an EU character that's a fan favorite of Brennan's. But one of the things we see sort of at the end of book 2 is Mick Bidlor makes his return, which is based off of the real life Mike Bidler. And Mander Zuma is there from Scourge. Yes, so we know that he survives now, and it's funny. There's a funny exchange. It's like. You worked for the Hutts too, Bidlor countered. I worked with the Hutts, Zuma corrected, and that was strictly to find the source of a dangerous substance and its producer. Same difference, Bidlor scorned. Mm-hmm. I just love that, like that little, it's like they both kind of worked with the Hutts. Because Mick Bidlor first appears, that character.
The Hutt Gambit.
The Hutt Gambit, and A.C. Crispin's Han Solo trilogy. And as someone who's, I've met Mike Bidler in real life, and I'm call him a friend. I think he's an amazing guy, and I would love to see him in half the Star Wars books that
I love that he's going toe to toe with a Jedi Master.
I know,
like, and willing to like bite back at him. I love that.
And of course, we get, this is on page 142. We get the infamous Navuta Bees reference, which Mike is the first to tell you made him smile. I think. It's,
and as Joe wrote, Mike Bidler shared a picture of the signed copy he was sent by Joe, which mentions the Navuta Bees as well.
He says, I mean, how many of you believe the Navuta bee was real until I discovered a colony in the Markarn plains of Balmora? Not this again, exclaimed Don Gulek. Yes, this again, Bidlor demanded. Most of you thought it was a Mandalorian myth. And even when I furnished proof, some of you tried to hand-wave it away, insisting that they were mutated quigs. So do you remember what I did? And this is like real life. They joked about this, and that's how it kind of made it into the book. I wrote an adventure story about them. While a lot of you were mucking about with semantics, the galaxy came to know that the Navuta bee is an actual creature and a genuine threat. So they had planned out this like fictitious 3-part Navuta bee trilogy of books,
and they'd slowly like reveal more, and then people thought it was actually happening.
That's cool. Yeah, Essential Guide to Warfare is an amazing book.
And what's great is within that there were so many references. Balmora, that's a reference. The Quigs, there is West End Games. Or are featured in the West End Games source books. Like, there's so much to unpack there. It just makes me want to, I don't know, just like shake Joe Bongiorno's hand rigorously and just like applaud him. Because
I feel like you did both
love
those
it.
things in his presence. Like
I wish I could meet
two and a
him.
half weeks ago.
Yeah, I think so.
I honestly, when you meet him, you're like, how does this person even exist? He's so wonderful.
I'd love to meet him. Like just over email, he's just such a great guy.
He's
I would say
What a
what
guy.
you see is what you get with Joe.
He maintains like one of the best Expand Universe resources just ever.
Yeah.
There's so much on the timeline that's like invaluable.
This would surprise me. I just love how there's a character called Mace Million Winduarte.
I do not know yet. I do not know. But that character predated Mace Windu, and George Lucas was a huge fan of West End Games, so that's why he took that from there.
It's
Apparently,
like Kybo Ren.
Yeah, it's like Kybo Ren's scenario.
Yeah. One thing that I kind of noticed, and I'm trying to get, I want to get your thoughts on this, but I'm gonna screen share this one capture that I took. And feel free to chime in, whomever. Let me see if I can find it. This one. It might be a little small, but okay. So he talks about. I mean, we can talk about like the 3 different types of portals, but he talks about here in the second paragraph, the Infinity Realm, formed to test out temporal turbulences in a containment of uncharted spheres that are, but are not, and yet are no more. Is that a reference to Star Wars Infinities? Is that like they've created like?
That's what I was thinking.
That's how I took it.
That
little
actually
bubble dimension, right?
Test out temporal turbulence. This sounds like it's like, oh, like let's try writing, what ifs. That's what it sounds like.
It's like Luke Skywalker from the April Fool's prank. Post from Zahn might be in one of those realms.
That's where every single Star Wars tale is, right there in the Infinity, over
right
there.
Yeah. I love how we call her Archon Ood, even though like the Watcher is like her title. We're just like, no, I'm gonna call her by her name, Archon Ood. There was another thing that I took a screenshot of. On
the screenshot that you had just shared, there was even a reference to the planet Anduin, and like every page there's something,
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like every page there's something here. Let me see if this shares. Oh no, wait, that's the exact same one. My bad. Here, I gotta open it in browser. I'm gonna kill this. And delete this. You'd think it was my first time using StreamYard. It's actually my 3rd time. So bear with me. Here, share screen. Okay, that first paragraph is like straight out of something you read on Lovecraft. Like, Ken, like, come on, read that. Like the ossuary world of Dim Umar.
Oh yeah, that's like
some Thul in his black house on Mezelmech. The pestilential low tech.
That's straight out of some Bloodborne stuff there.
Hershun the Devout, known to the myths as Hershun the Destroyer, that enormous mollusk who gorged his Iblaton offspring, blood from his teats in the carnal citadel.
That's so good. It's gross, but it's good, and I love it.
I read that and I was like, oh man, it's like H.P. Lovecraft lives on. Yeah,
I cannot wait to hear how the narrator for the Supernatural Encounters audio drama is gonna pronounce some of these words.
Ooh.
And maintaining consistency as well. It's gonna be great to hear. I've only listened to 2 Star Wars audio dramas, only 2, and this will be a must listen though for me.
I think I did see reference to the Abominor, Titus, but yeah, I also look forward to listening to this. What, like 60-hour audio drama?
Just dedicate a whole week to it. Just take off work, just be listening to this.
Lean back in your recliner, put the fire on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's right,
Pour myself some tea.
Yeah.
Some of that blue milk, hot chocolate.
Some Corellian ale.
Talking of like metatextual points in this book, there was one interesting kind of reference of how it's written. Let me see if I shared that correctly. So it's like It was his decision not to write it in the usual manner, but as a hybrid of narrative and analytic styles. I don't pretend to understand it myself, but he made it clear that it wasn't intended for this body, but for the public. If that's the case, why are you using big words? Anyways, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But it really reads like almost like a professor is writing this, right? Like he's a historian, but it reads like a professor is.
That's something I was gonna say. I'm an aspiring writer. I use the word aspiring in huge italics. But I'm an aspiring writer. I'd love to write. I've been reading for forever. I've always had my head in a book. I would take my book to the party and then get mad if someone touched it. So I've always wanted to be a writer, and this feels like I am learning so much. So I understand why the big words like are off-putting for pleasure reading, right? But like I'm like out here like taking notes, like trying to figure out how I can be a better writer, because this is like you said, it's like a professor. I'm treating this as like my first college course from a professor. Like, what can I learn from this? Trying to squeeze every last droplet out of all of this knowledge here. It's absolutely amazing.
I'll tell you, you know, being in college now, like this is kind of a better teacher. So,
I minored in political science, and one of the big takeaways was if you want your audience to learn something, write it for them. Don't write it for the other theory nerds who've read every single book on politics ever. So the acknowledgement in universe that this is for the public, and the acknowledgement from Joe is like, I'm not going to write this as a scientific text because that sounds terrible. But that was like,
yeah,
political understanding.
I started using one of the words that I learned from this book in a recent. When I wrote that like Titus fan fiction the other day, I used the word incarnadine.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, and I pulled it straight from Supernatural Encounters. So I've learned something too.
I feel like we're all learning in one way or another through this book, because it's just so it's just so big, and there's just so much to take from it. I know for me, you know, I got the book like shortly after I started college, and you know, I'm taking a it's like a college English, and you know, I placed into it, and
Nice.
you know, it's just straight essay writing, so it's just like one after the other. So the first few essays I've written, I've just kind of like one of the prompts was just like, write about a journey you've taken either in the physical realm or like internally. And like I did like a internal journey of self-discovery, and I made it like as like weird and like just deep as I could. And you know, I was taking inspiration from Supernatural.
You emulated it.
Yeah, and I was like, I want to mirror this writing because it's just so high level, and I know that I can impress with it, you know, and I'm good at writing essays, so it's like I did it well, and I, you know, got a good grade on it. So
Very nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like
Speaking-
you should submit it to Matt's Expanded Universe website and see if he'll throw it up there, considering it was you know, EU inspired in a way.
Yeah.
True. Speaking of words that like are just wild.
I actually
Oh, sorry. Is my connection cutting off?
No, you're good.
No, you're good.
I mean,
You're good,
Okay.
Brandon.
There was a word in there, thermologically, and I had no idea what that meant. I don't know if anyone else knows what it meant, but it's not actually a word. It's like a word that's been built off of another word, and the original word is thermogic, and it means like a study of it was an ancient study of divine magic. And it was an ancient group of people who tried to learn divine magic by peeling back transitory layers of self-being to discover themselves, and through that they'd unlock magical powers. And so that's what thermogic was. Like it was like a lifestyle, a religion almost. And so he's turned that into a word, and he's describing how these beings were shaping other beings, and he just calls it thermologically. They thermologically shape them using these divine magical powers. And I thought that was amazing.
So he's added to the English language in addition to adding to Star Wars lore.
Bongiorno is the GOAT. I'm telling you, he's so good.
What
Like-
about the word adumbrations? 'Cause there was a bit of controversy about that word, adumbrations, which is I googled it and I could not find a meaning for that word.
Must
But
be
yeah.
from one of his old Pulp Fiction books, maybe.
I
Another new
believe
word.
that was what you had said. If anyone knows the meaning of the word adumbrations, I think I can kind of discern it just from the context. But please send me a message or comment or
Yeah.
leave a comment on the video afterwards.
Yeah, I love how much this book is kind of teaching fans, you know, like different things in different ways and different ways to view things. Like for instance, like for us and like how we were just talking about, like it's influenced my writing style and how I write things and how
Yeah.
I perceive things. And like we're kind of seeing that with Hex too. Like it's kind of changing his views gradually as well as he learns more and more.
Yeah.
And I feel like this book really excels because it can just connect with people and it can connect to reality, and it feels so big and grand, but it also feels personal, you know, and it feels like we're all just taking different things from it and interpreting it in different ways. And I think it's just so great because like a book that you can connect with and learn from is one of the greatest things to me.
I think that's really profound what you just said. You said it's big and grand on this like universal scale, but also feels personal. And that's how it
Deeply.
feels to me too. I read this book and it feels like it was written just for me in the sense
Yeah.
that like it appeals to my interests, right? In the
Exactly.
best possible way.
Especially there's a really touching bit. Max has probably read it, where it's the wildflowers and the weeds.
Yeah.
And like it is so touching. It had me like
Really good.
like wiping
Yeah,
wiping my eyes
Yeah.
a little bit. It's deeply personal.
it's good
And
stuff.
Joe's flexing his writing ability. He can do
He's
this
so good.
grandiose, dense, packed mythological tale. He can do this horror element, this Lovecraftian element. He can do comedy that has you laughing. He can do touching, heartfelt moments that speak to you on a personal level. And he does it all with such elegance and effortless grace.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
The finesse of his writing is beautiful. Like I honestly, can he be my English teacher in school? Like honestly, for one, I can't even understand what my English teacher's saying. Because he's like this old dude. He's like kind of like slurring his words. So I'm like, wait, what did he just say?
Can we talk about the dialogue too? The banter between Q9 and
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh my god, it's fantastic.
So
Yeah.
good.
So perfect. One of the
It's
highlights
so
of the
good,
book for me.
Yeah, no, like their companionship is so nice. And like on their way out of Otherspace, they're kind of like being like, you know, like, man, like we're about to die, and like I think you're a great droid, you know. You know, like he didn't say that exactly, but like they're like, you know, I picked you because you can like think, you know, you're willing to learn. So
I was reading that section of the book one night on my bed, just me and my dog. My dog's just sitting right beside me as I'm reading it with his head on my leg. And I'm just like, me and Oreo, my dog, are just like Hex and Q9,
Yeah.
you know? And it's just so nice, you know?
Yeah,
The companionship.
S tier name for a dog, by the way, Oreo.
Oreos are always good.
Okay, I got something to share. Let me know what you think of this. The last paragraph. There is a reference there that is, you know, might be controversial to some.
The multiverse thing.
The world between worlds
Yes.
makes its first appearance.
Yeah.
Archon Ood talks about how even Celestials won't travel the world between worlds because it's super dangerous, and yet humans or certain Togruta seem to be continually trying. And I just thought I was curious about your thoughts about the inclusion of the world between worlds. Like I think we all knew sort of before the fact that there was going to be references to the world between worlds in this. I personally don't. I mean, like I think it's like par for the course with a book like this. I don't find it offensive at all. I'm not off put by it at all. I think I would expect for it to be mentioned. In fact, it would be weird for it not to be mentioned in this book.
There was ever a time. It should be now.
Yes.
I'll say, but you go, Brendan. You go.
So I wasn't a big fan of the World Between Worlds as a concept. This was in my early days when I was giving Disney Canon the old college try, and I was watching through Rebels, and I just was like so put off by it, if that makes sense. So I was very skeptical when it was coming back, honestly. But the way it's done really won me over, because this isn't, you know the old saying, this isn't your mother's whatever. This isn't that version's World Between Worlds. This is Joe Bongiorno's World Between Worlds.
This isn't
And
the
it
Dave
is
Filoni World Between Worlds.
It's nuanced. It's layered. And he even gives it a different name. He calls it later on the space between spaces, which I think is really good. And he elaborates on it and makes it different. It's like the EU's version of the World Between Worlds, which in and of itself could be connected to the Disc Canon's World Between Worlds. And so I think it works great. It's different. It is very different. But also the same, if that makes sense.
This whole concept of the woods between and beyond realms, it reminds me of The Magician's Nephew, the Narnia book,
yes.
where they put on the green rings, and then they kind of surface from a pool, and there's all these other pools around, and they all lead to different worlds.
That's what I've been saying. It's so C.S. Lewis at times. It so emulates his writing style and his creativity and his imagination. It also pulls like straight from the Never-Ending Story. Stuff like in book 1 with the 3 doors. Seems straight from there. And then the Tolkien stuff in here too, with these like this fabric, this tapestry of lineages that we find later on. He's pulling from the best classic literature. That is a great analogy to C.S. Lewis and The Magician's Nephew.
Yeah, it's what immediately came to mind. Ken, Al, any thoughts on the World Between Worlds?
Ken, you got anything?
I think it's done pretty well. It's done with a lot more nuance, like Brennan said, and it's not Filoni's World Between Worlds. It's Joe's. So yeah.
I mean, even if it's Filoni's World Between Worlds, it's the World Between Worlds, but it's done. It works better in context. I feel like. Grand
for sure.
It's that same thing of the midichlorians and the wills. It's in this context, it works really well because you can sit there and you can kind of massage it out. You can kind of understand exactly what he's trying to say, not just, oh, here's this dimension where you can go back in time. It's more nuanced than that, and that's appreciated, to say the least.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, watching Rebels, like, the casual fan is going to look at the World Between Worlds and say time travel. That's how it's going to be interpreted, and that's how it's still interpreted today. You'll see YouTube videos pop up and they're like, oh, like so-and-so is going to go through the World Between Worlds and go back to this time and visit this person. And, the way it's done in Supernatural Encounters is just so much better because they call it an observatory, where it's just somewhere where you can look.
Yeah.
You can interact with it because it'll mess things up. It's just like flow walking. It reminds me of flow walking in like Legacy of the Force, where it's like Jason says, like you can look at things, but you shouldn't mess with it because in the long run it'll screw it all up.
When it said about being an observatory where you can look into all these other universes, other points in the time, other possibilities, it instantly brought my mind to my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, I know that's not everyone's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I'm talking about the 2012 series, the 3D animated series. And in that, they go to this area.
Oh.
Just kidding. Just kidding. I was like, 2012, get out of here.
Well, they go to this place with portals, and there's a portal to your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they're looking at them walking across the street in like 2D cartoon animation, and they're seeing themselves in another reality. And later there will be crossover, but they're observing the other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle universes. They see the comic universe that started it all, and it's like that. It's an observatory. You can see what else is out there.
I love that idea.
This is another like metatextual thing where he's trying to bridge the gap between Disney's expanded universe and the original, and trying to make it work, trying to do yet another thing to sort of massage the old wounds and kind of bring everyone back together. I really respect that.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well, and I also respect it.
And I like how they. I'm sorry if I cut you off there.
No, you
Marcel.
didn't. I had nothing else to say.
But I like how they how you mentioned earlier how the Celestials don't even dare tamper with it. They won't, it's just kind of there, and then going off of what Al said with kind of bridging the gap between new canon and the EU, it's like they mention several like races in this book, like the Zepho, which are big in Fallen Order and stuff. And then they'll like later on, I've posted on my story, they'll mention like the Purgle, which are kind of big right now in the community, I guess, because of what's going on in Ahsoka and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I do think it's cool because like it makes it seem like a lot of these concepts, like these species, like they took place, like they are from the EU, and it's just, it makes it cooler. And I feel like in the EU and the way Joe Bongiorno does it is like it just feels so much better,
It's ironic to see like the EU borrow from the Disney timeline.
I know. I was thinking about that too. I was like, oh, they're gonna take from us, so we're gonna take from them.
Ironic.
That. I love it.
And SWOTOR's been doing that too. Joe's following SWOTOR's lead. SWOTOR took a species from Rogue One. SWOTOR took a species from Resistance. Stuck it in SWOTOR. And does that mean SWOTOR is non-canon? Does that mean SWOTOR is Disney canon timeline? No, it's part of the expanded universe. Mm-hmm. In the same way that Disney canon can have a Thrawn that they pulled from the EU, their Thrawn is not our Thrawn.
No.
They're different Thrawns.
Yeah.
Our Zephron, our Lethal, different than theirs. But it's a mirror universe. If a universe existed like ours, we would probably all be there. Would we like Star Wars? Would we be having this discussion right now? But we'd probably exist. As Star Trek guys, yeah.
Well, hard shift. No, I'm kidding. One last thing that I did want to discuss, because we're probably going to end this in a few minutes, but I wanted to share screen again because I've just been doing that a lot right now, is this concept of 3 different types of gates. So there was... The first is the rarest. They're trans-dimensional gates. They're made for Celestials, allowing the Wills, Diatham, and the Ones to enter into our realm. So it's like they're able to like come down to our realm and help us out, kind of thing. The second is the interstellar gates, and then the third are is the third here. Most interesting and unlike all the others, called the Steward's Gate. So I'm not sure if we learn more about that in book 3 or book 4 or whatever, but I thought that was interesting how they talk about that. And again, because Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void is actually a good book and not a bad book, like people say, they talk about the whole plot is about finding a hyperspace gate. It's awesome. So you should read Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void and not listen to Brennan.
But not first. Liam
not first. Yeah, not
Liam
first.
Almost stopped reading EU books because of it.
Read it like 2/3 of the way into your EU journey.
And then I got about 78 pages in, and then I was like,
we forgot to mention how Arca and Ood, they were guarding a gate in their little underground area.
They were guarding.
They were
the second type of the gates, the Stargate, right? They were guarding an interstellar gate, and which is awesome. It's like where does that lead? But I think the idea was it didn't lead anywhere because they didn't have like a corresponding gate to activate.
Yeah.
That
maybe it was used once.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the idea was that they were guarding it because if the Osirians had rehabilitated the planet Eartha, then these Lovecraftian cosmic entities would come and just use that Stargate to wreak havoc in the Star Wars galaxy or something like that.
Yeah.
And didn't they also mention that the gates can be used as like super weapons as well? So they were like, guarding against the evil forces, like
taking it over and
it's not for everybody. I wouldn't
love
say
the comics.
I wouldn't say I liked it. I didn't find it like to be the worst thing ever, like some people claim. There was a Dark Empire reference, specifically Empire's End reference. We find out that there was an individual responsible for tampering with the missile so that it didn't blow up Nespis 8 and wipe out the I guess the alliance at that point, because they had gone back to an alliance. They had been reduced to an alliance from a New Republic.
I was trying to connect him to the guy from, I think it's Trusit Bakura, because they have the same last name, and I was like,
Thanos? Is it Thanos? Is
Yeah,
his last name, I believe.
Yeah, Thanos, and I think from Truce Bakura, it's Peter Thanos, something like that.
Interesting.
But
I mean, they might be related.
They could be. It's also possible I misremember the name, to be honest. Because I remember
Supernatural Encounters 2 might answer your question. Just kidding.
Coming out in 2036.
Yeah,
that's a rush job.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Some people have like criticized that and said like, what was this necessary? Like, why was this in there? It's like, dude, like, what book are you reading? This is the book that like retcons, like, it changes your perspective on everything. So it's like, what is necessary at the end of the day? Like, where do you draw the line, right? So I thought it was cool, but everybody's perspective is going to differ on that.
You know how like I think a lot of us talk about like reading New Jedi Order for the first time and then wishing we could experience it again.
Yes.
I feel the exact same way as I'm going through this. It is breaking my heart to turn the pages because I'll never get to experience it the same way again. Yeah. And it just feels really bittersweet.
If you want to do it just my way, I mean, I know the plot points because I read them, but like just wait 20 years and then read NJO again, like I'm planning on doing. So, but yeah, I mean, I the only other thing that I had on my list that I wanted to talk about was this list. The triangle within the four smaller there's four smaller triangles within a triangle, and that's like the symbols representing the Force. Have we seen that before? Is that like a symbol that's in? Okay.
Doesn't mean anything to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's probably some super early Marvel thing that was in one panel.
Or is that TCW? How many of those like people that visited Yoda were there? Was there like a number that would correlate to 5?
You're talking about okay. Are you talking about in season 6 of TCW?
Yeah, that's what I was referring
to. Priestess, there was 5 of them.
Okay, because I was trying to think, was there like 3 and then 3 within?
Let's go back and edit one out so that there's the Force.
If only was onto something.
Yeah, the other thing that I came across that I thought was I think it was maybe back on old Osseria, like the Keeper had made androids out of Celestials or something like that. Do you recall what I'm okay?
That's in that Keeper story.
Oh, is it okay?
Yeah.
Later we get.
I have to reread that. I don't remember anything about that. Okay.
Marcel, later on for another Star Trek fan, there's a bit that says a crystalline entity transported some humans that built androids.
Right.
And I was like, wait a minute, what? What are you talking about? Is this a Star Trek reference? But yeah, there's a lot of androids appearing in Supernatural Encounters throughout.
It's that moment when you find out that Waru is a giant Borg cube.
Sweet.
I'm just kidding. Okay, well, we've been going on for 2 hours. I think we're gonna probably wrap it up. Any final thoughts from anyone?
I can't wait for book 3.
Yeah.
You guys. That's my wrapping up thought.
Yeah, the plan is to do I think roughly half of book 3, so about 70-ish pages in the next week or 2. So stay tuned for that. I look forward to it. Any other final thoughts?
Read Supernatural Encounters if you have already.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's free. It's free. StarWarsTimeline.net. You can go and download the PDF and read it for yourself. And I guess in the meantime, we will get our chewbies out of here.
Yeah.
See everybody later.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye. Of course.